Okay, in this tutorial we're going to deal with importing and exporting and opening files in Max. Now, opening and saving files as Max really isn't anything too difficult, so we'll start with that, and then we'll cover exporting and importing of objects, because I'm guessing a lot of you will be using different versions of Max, so we'll go into what some of the problems are involved with that. Okay, so opening a file is pretty easy. We go to File, Open, and then you can go find the files that you want to open. In this case, most of them are actually in my Max 7 directory, which is just where I happen to keep them. And in this case, we'll just open, let's see, we'll open this guy. Okay, there we go. Now, this is just the model of this seahorse critter thing, whatever it is, and he actually has a texture map that goes with him. So the model has come in fine, but the texture map did not come in with him. And this is pretty common with all 3D programs. The 3D program just doesn't know where that file is. When he was saved, it saved the location of the file, but it's changed since, and now Max doesn't know where that is. So let's go back and open this again. We'll go to File, Open, and which one was this one? This was this one, I believe. File, this one. So I'm going to hit Open, and what we're getting here when it comes up is it's saying that this file was originally made with a different plugin that's not on my computer. Now that might be okay. It might cause the file not to open. In this case, it's telling me that the missing file is Darktree DLT. DLT is a plugin, and Darktree is the name of the plugin that it needs. In this case, Darktree is a shader type filter that this guy was originally made with. Now I know I don't need that filter really for it to open for what I need. So I'm going to skip this. Now when I skip it, if it goes to the next step, which it did, that's good. And it's now asking me, where are these texture maps? That these directories don't even exist anymore. In fact, when they were made, they weren't even made on this machine, and you can see it's a Max 3 directory, which was a long time ago. So I need to tell my Max where these files are. Now this checkers one I don't need, but I do need this one. This is this little model's texture map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Browse, and I'm going to look for that texture map. Here's all the directories that Max 8, in my case, is looking in. But I can add a directory to this list just in case I ever have any files or any textures that are in another directory. So I'll just go to Add. And I know that my little seahorse texture map is hidden in my Max 7 directory in this case. Although I don't know where, so let's see, he's not in there. So I'm betting he's in Maps. Turtle horse, here he is. And there's the maps that it's going to be looking for. So I say use that path. And then I'm going to say OK. And if it comes back with that particular map missing from this list, I know that Max has now found that map. So I'm going to say Continue. And now it's going to tell me obsolete data. That's okay. That just means that it was made in a previous version of Max. Previous being very important at this point. So it's a previous version of Max. You could also say don't display that message again, but I won't. So it comes up on these tutorials and say okay. Now our little model here, I can rotate him around. He's all whole. He's a mesh. You can see here his wireframe mesh is intact. There's nothing special about him. He's just a mesh. If I go under my material editor, which we have not dealt with too much, you'll see that he does have a texture map on him. It's just not showing. And at one time it was showing. If I hit this little checkered box, his texture map will now show up. And he's completely whole. All his texture information is there. Our little seahorse has been rescued from his Max 3 creation folder, and he's now alive and well in Max 8. So there's no problem with opening up files from a previous version of Max. Max 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 files will all open up in any version of Max that came after them. So this one was a Max 3 file, and he opened just fine in Max 8. Most of you will be using Max 7 or 8, I assume. When I'm making these videos, Max 9 has just come out. Max 9 is fine as well. There's really nothing too different about Max 9 as far as what we're going to be covering in this class. Now, if you want to save this little guy, you go to File, Save As, and we'll save him to our desktop in this case, just so that I have a new place to save him. I'm going to make a new folder on my desktop. I'm going to call this Test Meshes, and we'll save him in there. We'll call him the same thing, and we'll say Save. We're going to save him as a Max directory, by the way, or a Max file. We'll say Save. Now let's say we make some changes on our little seahorse at this point. I'm not going to make any. Here, we'll make some. We'll make our seahorse a little bit taller. Let's squash him down. He looks better when he's squashed down. But let's say we've changed our seahorse in some way. We've now worked on him for the last 5 or 10 minutes. He looks slightly different. You don't want to go to File, Save again, because that will save over the old file. What you want to do is Save As, and hit this little plus button. This is called saving an iteration. And watch what will happen. I'm going to hit that little plus button. It goes away. But let's go over to that file here, where it's Test Meshes. And you'll see that I have 2 files. I have Equin Final 2 and Equin 2 Final 03. This 03 was made after this one. You can tell by the date stamp. And this is what will happen if I save an iteration. I'll get an 04, an 05, an 06, an 07, and so on from here on out. You always want to save an iteration so that if something goes wrong or the file is corrupt, that you'll always be able to go back to the file before it. And something will go wrong. It always does. So always save an iteration. Remember, that's File, Save As, little plus button. You hit that, and it'll add another Max file. After a while, you can delete the older Max files. Okay, and if we want to go and save this guy in a different way, you'll notice that when this was saved, his texture map didn't go with him. Again, if we check our Test Meshes folder, there's no texture map in here, only a Max file. We have to save the texture map with him, or he won't open correctly next time. We're going to have to push button and go find the texture map. The way around that is to use the Utilities tab, which is this little hammer, and we don't get over here very much in this class. Go to More, and go down here to Resource Collector. Double-click on that. Resource Collector. You hit Browse, tell it where you want to save it. In my case, I'll save it to my little Test Meshes folder. And then click on Include Max File. And then you just hit Begin. You don't need to do anything else here. You hit Begin. It won't do anything. It won't tell you it's done. But look what happened in our little Mesh folder. You can see now it's moved his texture map over into this folder with the file. So that now when I open the file, the texture map is with the file and it won't have any problem finding it. This is really important when our scenes get bigger, especially with the project we're going to be working on in this class. We're going to have a lot of texture maps, a lot of parts and pieces, and we want all of them to be in the same folder. Okay, now, if I want to save this critter and open him in Max 8, so we can do that. I've made him in Max 3. I opened him in Max 8. I've saved him in Max 8. He'll open in Max 8 again just fine. But look what happens if I go back to Max 7. You'll see this is Max 7, and you'll also notice it looks very, very similar to Max 8. In fact, almost exactly the same. But this is Max 7 I'm in right now. If I go to File, Open, and I go back to my little test folder here, this guy, that's the one I just saved in Max 8. But in Max 7, See all these DLLs and DLCs and everything, DLUs that it's missing? This is all the stuff that was new in Max 8 that just got saved with my mesh. And now if I try to open him, I'm going to get an error because I tried to say open a Max 8 file in Max 7. You can't do that, at least this way. So you can open a Max 7 file in 8, but you can't open a Max 8 file in 7. They're not backwards compatible. Any old Max meshes you have, you can open in 8, you can save them in 8, and you can keep working on them in 8. Or 9, same thing. But you can't go backwards once you save it. Okay? And the file won't open. You'll see I get no seahorse. Very sad. So going back to Max 8, now we're in, oops, it's over here, Max 8. I'm going to show you how you can get this file to me if you absolutely had to. So if you're using a Max 9, which probably not very many of you are, but it's possible, and you want to send me a file that I can open, you're going to have to export it, because I don't have Max 9 here on my machine right now. You go to File, Export, and then you, oops, did that wrong. You got to select the seahorse. Get that back to normal. File, Export. You can export selected. Actually, that might be a better thing to show you in this case. I'll do export selected because I've picked the file. That way I don't have to worry about all his animations going with it. And then we're going to say we want to export it as a 3ds file. This one, 3D Studio 3ds. Give it a name. And we'll hit save. We want to preserve the texture coordinates, and we'll say OK. It may rename the texture map. That's fine, because we can reload the texture map later. Now, let's reset this scene. And let's import our scene that we just saved, which is the Seahorse 3DS. You may have to drop this down. Whoops, not that one. You may have to drop this down to say all files or 3DS. It's going to want to know, what do you want to do? Do you want to completely replace the current scene, which we do, or do you want to merge the objects with the current scene? We'll just completely replace the current scene, and here's our seahorse. You'll notice he doesn't have his texture map because his texture map was renamed. And so we have to go get his texture map. This is the material editor. The easiest way is to hit this little eyedropper tool. Pick it. Here's his texture. You can tell by the blue. If we go under maps, here's what it's looking for its map. If I click here, click there, go back to my desktop because I know his map is in here. I'm going to give him this map. Remember, it renamed it. And now his map is on him, and if I click this, his map is completely set up. And he's a 3DS file. So we opened although we opened it in 8, I should have skipped over to 7 to do that. But it's the same thing. So this would open in 7 if you wanted it to. Okay? So that's exporting and importing. You can also export as OBJ file, and that's located right here. OBJ, that will work as well. Although I like 3DS, but OBJ will work if you're going over to Maya or something along those lines. Okay. So that's how you move these files back and forth. And it gets a little clumsy to keep track of, but don't worry about it too much. It's not that hard.